The first warning was not the alarm, but the smell ozone and hot dust, the scent of a dying circuit. Then the console flared white, swallowed its own color, and everything inside the cockpit jumped a centimeter to starboard. Hold together. I told the ship, as if it were an animal. One more minute, girl. Atmospheric entry is a math problem until it's not. The numbers said the descent corridor would be stable. The reality was a wall of interference rising like a mountain under my hull. The slipstream's tail snagged the planet's magnetosphere, 1,000 invisible hooks. The stabilizers went first, then the left gimbal on thruster C. The Kestrel tilted into the wind and tried to wear it like a coat. The coat fought back. The view outside the canopy turned into a mad garden, green-choked valleys, rivers that flashed like metal, clouds stacked like cities. Lightning crawled across the underbelly of a storm bank, slow and curious, as if tasting me. Mayday. Mayday, I said out of habit and loneliness. There was no one to hear it, not for 12 light hours. Veronine is not friendly. An electromagnetic spike tore through the avionics, and the ship went quiet in the worst possible way. No hum, no chatter. Just the groan of stressed metal and my own breath. The landing algorithm tried to take the yoke from me. I took it back. We fell on a slant, skipping the upper air like a stone. Through the shaking, I saw a dark smear ahead. Forest. I fanned the retro thrusters, wanted the valley, got the ridge. Branches scissored the hull. The Kestrel kissed a stand of violet-barked trees and then dug a furrow into spongy earth. Something cracked. Maybe the landing struts. Maybe my luck. We stopped. Silence came down like a lid. I breathed once, twice, a third time. That felt borrowed. My hands tingled, still clamped to the stick. I let go and the cockpit felt huge and far away, like I was looking at it through the wrong end of a scope. Ship status, I croaked. The backup system stuttered to life with a tone like a desperate chirp. Primary power offline. Atmosphere, breathable with caution. Radiation, nominal. Structural integrity, 71%. Warning, external M anomalies persisting. Breathable with caution, I repeated. Like dating on shore leave. I popped the harness and stood to fast. The world tilted. Somewhere in the back of my head, a small practical voice said, "Move. Fuel can leak. Leaks can ignite." I grabbed the flight bag, the med kit, and the salvage pry. The canopy had webbed into safety fractures but held. I kicked the manual release. It coughed and opened, begrudging as an old door. The jungle air was wet and green. Not just a smell, there was weight to it. A pressure behind the nose that made everything taste faintly sweet. Fern trees arched overhead, their fronds wide as wings. The ground was springy, threaded with pale roots that pulsed very faintly, as if the forest had its own heartbeat. I slid down the hull and dropped to the ground. The Kestrel looked wounded. I patted her flank. "I'll come back," I said, a lie I intended to make true. The first sound that wasn't me or the ship was a rippling chorus. Not birds exactly, but something with a beak and a mind to argue about territory. Then a second sound layered under it, voices. Human timbre, non-human music. They were close. I lifted my hands without thinking. They came from the trees like shadows that had learned to be people. Tall, most of them a head taller than me and long-limbed, with a deliberate grace that spoke of balance and hunting. Their hair ran the spectrum of a storm, black, silver, blue-black with green iridescence. Their skin had that same iridescence, a sheen you noticed only when they turned, and the light made a second person on their cheekbones. Women, all of them. They ringed me with practiced efficiency, a circle at the body lengths, spears that were not quite spears, shafts of dark wood tipped with blades that hummed. A soft subsonic threat felt rather than heard. Their clothes were heavy on ornament, feathers, polished bones, slivers of crystal that shivered with contained energy. Their eyes were the unsettling part, not the color, amber, pale gray, night-sea green. But the way those eyes held questions like knives. One stepped forward. The leader, I guessed. Not because she was the most adorned though she was, but because the others shifted subtly to make room for her decisions. She studied my face as if reading it for text. I tried standard first, calm and slow. "I'm not a threat," her head tipped. She answered in a tongue made of liquid syllables that clicked together at the joints. I caught the structure: subject, verb, inflection for challenge, but none of the meaning. I spread my hands further, showing empty palms. I considered kneeling, rejected it as too submissive, settled for a half bow that kept my center of gravity under me. She said something short and flat. Two of them moved, fast. A loop of woven fiber settled on my wrists before I could blink. It tightened and then bit mildly. The bracelet hummed against my skin and my hands went heavy. My fingers fuzzy at the edges as if I'd slept on them wrong. Neural dampeners, crude but effective. Okay, I said. You do tech. They took the flight bag with care and a proprietary air. Another gestured toward the ship. A trio ghosted past me, looked into the cockpit, and made little noises like finding a robust carcass worth sharing. Salvage was a language I understood even if I didn't like being on the wrong verb of it. The leader pointed to the path that wasn't a path but became one. When the undergrowth simply rearranged itself, the roots underfoot changed direction. The fronds lifted. The forest opened its ribs. They didn't shove me. They didn't need to. The circle moved with me in it, and that circle was an argument I wouldn't win. We walked. The air was full of work, insects building low, resin dripping slow, a distant rumble that turned out to be water thinking about falling. A flock of something like glass kites rose from a dark pool, the light catching their wings and throwing it back in knife-shaped shards. A creature the size of a goat, but built like a mantis, peered at us with patient loathing, and clicked its mouth. One of the women cut a fruit from a vine and split it with a thumbnail. The inside was bright as a wound and smelled like cinnamon. She held it out to me, eyes steady, testing. I'd learned the hard way that refusing hospitality is its own kind of insult. Also learned that unknown sugars can wreck you. I took a cautious bite. Sweet, then a peppery aftertaste that was less flavor than sensation. Like a door opening behind my nose. Warmth spread down my throat, along the neural pathways that the wrist loop had damped. For a heartbeat I saw geometry in the forest, the angle at which every leaf turned to drink light. Then it was gone. The woman smiled very slightly, like a scribe pleasing a margin with a flourish. I handed the fruit back. She finished it with neat bites and flicked the rind into the underbrush, where something soft and invisible devoured it with a contented sigh. We came to the village without arriving. One step was forest. The next was a plaza ringed by structures grown rather than built trees braided together, until they decided to be houses. Houses with ribs, ribs that flowered into balconies. Balconies from which watched faces regarded me with the intensity people reserve for flares. And prophecies. There were children, though fewer than I expected. They stood with adults and moved like small versions of them, quiet, disciplined. Every movement a piece of the group. They were all girls. My mind noted that and tucked it away with a chill I didn't name. The plaza's heart was a basin carved from a single stone, filled with water that held a faint light of its own. As we passed, the light brightened, as if curious. The leader, later I would know her name as Sira of the third harvest, touched the basin, with 2 fingers and then her brow, a blessing or a password. They brought me to a low building whose entrance was defined by bones polished to a hard gleam. Not human bones, something long and serpentine, something that had grown horns not to fight with but to sing. The threshold hummed when I crossed it, acknowledging a new thing in its mouth. Inside was dim. The air tasted like crushed leaves and metal. They sat me on a platform and looped a second band around my chest, not tight, just present. The weight of the dampeners made thoughts slow down, made fear manageable by flattening it. A woman with hair white as quartz came forward, younger than the hair suggested, older than the eyes allowed. She wore a mantle of translucent feathers that shifted colors when she breathed. The others made space around her the way they had around Sira of the third harvest, but different space, a clearing where words would be planted. She spoke, and her voice was a tuned instrument with a sorrow in its wood. She gestured to me, to my face, to my chest. She drew in the air a simple sigil, a straight line with a cut through it, a dividing mark, then another sign, a circle with a hollow center. I tried words. Elian, I said, touching my chest. Elian. I made the shape of my name with my mouth and a shape of me with my hand. She frowned, then smiled, then mirrored me. Elian. She considered the taste of it. Elian. She tried again, precise as a scholar. She fitted her palm to her sternum. Saratek. She gestured to the loop on my wrists and said a single crisp word. The loop warmed, slackened, released. I brought my hands down slow, careful to keep my palms visible. Numbness withdrew with pins and needles honesty. I didn't flex my fingers, didn't reach for anything. Sira of the third harvest watched me as a cliff watches the sea. Saratek made another sigil, this one a double spiral, and pointed at my head, then hers. A universal proposition, understand. The translator I'd brought the one in my bag was gone with the bag, and the bag was wherever they put things they didn't trust. So I used what I had left, my tongue and patience. I mirrored her gestures. I pointed to objects, offered words. Stone, water, tree, sky. She accepted some, rejected others. Corrected me with gentleness and a tiny exasperation that made me like her. Some hours later or minutes, time had lost its edges. Sira of the third harvest re-entered with a bowl. The scent was broth, sharp and clean. She held it to me but did not hand it. I looked to Saratek, who nodded once. I drank. Warmth unwound a knot I hadn't noticed under my ribs. Sira watched the line of my throat as if checking for poison taking root or failing to. This is hospitality, I said aloud, not expecting comprehension. Or fattening. A murmur at the doorway drew my eyes. 3 women stood there with hunger tucked into their restraint. One had a small blade in her hand, and her lips parted just enough to show teeth honed to points. Not decorative. The murmur had rhythm argument braided with song. I caught a word repeated like a drumbeat, Zal. The vowel slid in the mouth. Pity married to contempt. Saratek heard it and went still. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she placed her hand on my shoulder with the formality of a rite. Her palm was cool. Zala, she said, slowly, as if offering me the blade of the word to hold by the handle. She tapped my chest lightly. Zala, Zala, I echoed, not knowing whether I accepted an insult, a title, or a sentence. She gestured for me to follow. The dampener on my chest released with a soft click. Sira of the third harvest stepped aside from the door, but her body still arranged itself between me and the women with knives for teeth. Their nostrils flared when I passed. One tilted her head, nested curiosity under her hunger. Another curled her tongue against a canine as if tasting a thought. Outside, the light had shifted. The forest's day had a second act. The plaza was fuller. Work had become decision. People clustered in chords of conversation. The talks braided toward a central post whose top was split into 3 tongues. Offerings hung from it, reels of fiber, the jawbone of a river beast. A broken crystal blade tied with red thread. They brought me to the post. The crowd moved in curving lines never straight, and those lines trained my eye. To the woman waiting there. She had no ornaments beyond the mantle of feathers. She needed none. Authority gathered on her like condensation. She was Saratek, I thought, but no, this was someone else, older and whiter than even her. When she lifted her hand, sound fell away. She looked at me not like prey or omen, but like a problem with a soul. She set her fingers against the post, and they came away glowing faintly, a memory of light clinging to her skin. She held that light up so we all could see it dim. High Seer, Saratek murmured at my shoulder, giving me a translation gift I hadn't earned. Then, in her language, to the crowd words I could not follow but felt in my bone marrow. The name Zal again, that hiss within the flute, a series of numbers, a wave of flat hands that rippled like tall grass in wind. A child darted forward, a girl with a scar shaped like a star on her temple. She stopped too close and stared up at me with the frank brutality of the very young. Zala, she asked, questioning or teasing. Her guardian pulled her back, gentle but firm. The High Seer stepped down from the post. She walked a slow circle around me, close enough that I felt her mantle breathe against my sleeves. On the third pass she stopped at my back and spoke to soft words. The crowd answered with a sound I had heard only in mess halls before a fight. Anticipation salted with hunger. Saratek's hand tightened at my elbow. Trial, she said in standard, flawless and quiet. The word fell between my shoes like a coin. Now, trial of what? I asked, stupidly, because every trial is of survival, either your bodies or your stories. Sira of the third harvest pressed something into my palm. A blade, small and leaf-shaped, with a hairline seamed down the center that thrummed. The crystal at its core ticked like a heartbeat. I looked up to find her eyes on mine, cool fire skating their surface. If I refuse? I asked her, though I spoke to the whole village. She made a tiny gesture that could have been a shrug or the closing of a door. The circle formed again, wide this time. The center scraped clean of anything that could trip the story. The ground had a stain I pretended not to see. The edges of the crowd held clusters, whose posture was more hunger than worry. Off to the side, a braided rack displayed mocked-up versions of my ship's part sculptural exhibit or threat. I couldn't tell. A gate at the far side of the circle unlatched with a dry clack. It swung inward. The space beyond was darkness, not empty but crowded with breath. A smell came out that had the logic of rot and the mathematics of metal. Saratek leaned in. "You live, you show us what your hunger is." Her expression was not unkind. "You die, we know what ours remains." Before I could answer, movement uncoiled from the gate. The creature stepped into the light with painful patience. 6 limbs, the front pair more hand than foot, each ending in pads whose surface shivered with tiny rotating plates teeth outside the mouth. Its skin was glassy, a window into a darker meat that pulsed with a slow light, as if its organs remembered the stars. The actual mouth was a set of concentric rings. When it yawned, it was like watching a flower bloom for blood. The crowd's collective breath feathered the air. Some tongues slicked lips. Some eyes closed, not in prayer but in savor. The blade in my palm ticked faster, as if it, too, had a pulse that answered mine. "Okay," I told the circle, the creature, the sky that had watched me fall. I shifted my feet, feeling for a ground that would hold choice. Let's agree none of us wanted this introduction. The creature's head tilted, calculating. I saw intelligence there. Not mine but parallel. A mind that had been given a tool and a hunger and told to reconcile them. It sprang. The first pass was a lesson. It wanted my legs first, to hamstring, to make the meal linger. I jumped, felt the rush of air as those impossible hands sliced the place my knees had been. The second pass was meaner. It fainted slow then sped, and I caught the glint of its rotating plates inches from my thigh. I cut without thinking. The blades seemed flared, split, and the leaf became to overlapping edges that sang. I scored the creature's shoulder. Its blood came out in beads that hung in the air as if gravity was a negotiable contract. The crowd made a sound I hoped was approval. We circled. I kept my breathing in a box. I let the creature come to me and spent my body like a currency, small coins, careful purchase. A misstep and I'd pay in bigger bills. It fainted again. I pretended to fall for it until I didn't. When it corrected mid-lunge, I turned my wrist and offered it the seam of the blade like a friend. The edges bit deep where its plates were softest at a joint I recognized too late to be proud. The creature screamed, an awful sweet note. The air suddenly tasted like copper and rain. It came once more out of pride. I would have, too. That last pass was direct, reckless, and it cost it. I stepped in and under, drove the split leaf up to the hilt beneath the hinge of its jaw bloom, and twisted. The light inside it guttered. The plates slowed. It folded with reluctant grace. We stood, the two of us, for a stretched instant, me panting, it learning what stillness meant. Then it fell all the way. Silence in the circle. The kind of silence that is 10,000 calculations held to a still point. Then sound returned in layers. The first layer, relief. The second, approval. The third, hunger again, because the tribe was a body too, and it had an appetite. Sarah of the third harvest approached me, hands open, eyes new. She touched my cheek with claws that could have cut me and didn't. The gesture had the softness of a mother testing a fever. "Zala," she said, but the word had changed shape in her mouth, a margin note added, not ours. Not yet. The high seer came then, mantle trembling, sorrow and interest braided in equal strands. She tilted her head at me once. The weight of that nod was promise or debt. Saratek put her palm to my shoulder, grounding me as the crowd shifted, as certain clusters edged closer, as teeth ornamental and otherwise glinted. "Not devour," she said to them in her voice that tuned people. "Not this one. The old hunger has many mouths. We have fed one. We will close the others for now. For now is a small gate you can walk a city through." I smiled because I was alive, and because smiling can be armor if you hold it the right way. Later, they caged me. Not iron bars. Bones, yes, grown into a lattice that sang when touched. They brought me water that tasted of cold fire and fruit that tasted of childhood I never had. A child, the Starscar girl, brought me a strand of woven fiber, and then, when her guardian scolded, turned the scold into a game by making faces behind the woman's back. I made one back. We were both told to behave by 3 different people and pretended grief for the form of it. Night edged the village. The forest's heartbeat got louder, or maybe mine learned the rhythm. Outside my bone cell, the tribe argued with calm intensity. The words rose and fell, braided in patterns I was beginning to recognize. Zal appeared in the braid often. So did another word, a carry set around the mouth as if it could cut the tongue, and maybe it had. I would later learn it meant a promise made at a funeral and kept at a birth. I rested my forehead against the bone lattice and felt it hum under my skin, the way a bridge hums when a city walks across it. I thought of the kestrel, silent and patient under the fern trees. I thought of the beacon I could build from her ribs. I thought of 100 eyes looking at me like a prophecy with teeth. Mission log, I whispered, though the recorder was gone and the log lived only where breath fogged bone. Elian Vey, planetary day unknown. Local time, night. Initial contact, successful if measured by heartbeats continued. Host society, female-led, technologically hybrid, ritualized hunger. Linguistic progress, first nouns, 1 indeterminate title. New word, Zal, personal status, caged but allowed to keep my skin for now, outside. Someone laughed rich and unapologetic. The sound slid under my guard and made a place. Another voice answered, sharp as a tool. The laughter dimmed. The forest breathed. I lay down on the woven mat they had given me. It was softer than anything had a right to be. Sleep came on padded feet, peered at me, decided I could be had. As I slid under, a last thought rose with stubborn buoyancy. They hadn't seen a man in a long time. 105 years, if I had heard the cadence of numbers right in the High Seer's litany. A century without men. A century to learn a new appetite. And me, a crash-landed correction or a relapse. I slept with the blade under the mat, because whatever I decided later, tonight survival was a short word with only 1 vowel. The tribe sang while I dreamed. The melody had edges. It tasted faintly of salt and metal, and the skin-warm sweetness of fruit. Somewhere in the second verse, someone said my name in their language. They made it sound like a door opening and a warning. Asterisk, the second morning in the bone cage smelled of smoke and wet stone. Not ship smoke, no burnt wiring. No acrid coolant, but wood mixed with a resin so sharp it stabbed the sinuses. It came from braziers the women tended around the plaza, thin trails curling up to the canopy, painting the air with invisible patterns. They wanted the smoke to do something, purify, summon. Warn, I didn't yet know which lessons in language heretic returned at dawn. She carried no spear, no mantle, only a small bowl and the patient severity of a teacher. She placed the bowl inside the cage, nudged it toward me with her foot. Inside was a paste the color of storm clouds, flecked with green heat. She said in rough but deliberate standard. I hesitated. She noticed, of course. She always noticed, not poison, she added, then tapped her chest. Saratek, give word. Her eyes were merciless but not cruel. The eyes of a surgeon before a cut. I obeyed, scooping with my fingers. The paste was bitter, then bright, then gone too quickly as if it dissolved into the blood before the tongue could tell stories about. It word, she prompted. Food, I said. Food, she repeated, shaping the vowel like a blade she intended to use later. She touched the paste. Jura, I nodded. Jura, food. So it began. For hours or what felt like hours we traded words, 1 for 1. Her finger pointed, my tongue supplied, and she either accepted with a nod or rejected with a clipped correction. Tree, leer, water, kala, sky, sile. When I pointed to myself, Elian, she didn't repeat. She stared, lips parted slightly, then answered in her tongue, Zal, the word again. That hiss in the center, the word the crowd had chanted. Zal, I echoed reluctantly. What does it mean? She tapped my chest with 2 fingers, not gently. Man, the law of absence. Later that day, they released me from the cage. Not to freedom, never that, but to walk under escort. Sira of the third harvest herself led, her clawed hands loose on the haft of her humming spear. I followed, to guards at my back, Saratek at my side with a satchel of crystal tablets. They brought me to the basin in the plaza, the one filled with water that glowed faintly. Today the whole village gathered around it. From balconies, from braided bridges, even from the high fronds of trees they watched. The high seer stood by the basin. Her mantle today was not feathers, but layered veils of fiber that shimmered like oil. She looked like a storm in the act of choosing where to fall. Saratek pushed me forward. The high seer raised both hands and silence struck. Then she spoke, slow, rhythmic. Every word landed like a drumbeat. I caught fragments, enough to sketch meaning. Zal, 105, years, blood, culling, law, the crowd murmured, answering in antiphonal waves. I watched their faces, some solemn, some hungry, some unreadable masks polished by ritual. The seer lifted a small crystal, no larger than a fingernail, set it on the basin's surface. Instead of sinking, it floated, burning from within. Images shimmered in the water, fuzzy at first, then cruelly clear. Men. The same iridescent skin as the women, the same gem-bright eyes, but their faces contorted, lips pulled back from sharpened teeth, their hands dripping with blood not their own. Children running, women fighting them with spears and flame. A man tearing into another man's neck as if it were a meal. I staggered back, bile in my throat. Saratek's voice near my ear. 105 years ago. The sickness of blood. Men changed. First hunger, then madness, then killing. She gestured at the images. Not disease, not plague. Something. Inside, old, woke. The high seer continued her chant. The crowd echoed. Saratek translated in whispers, not for my sake alone, but to test my understanding. They killed their sons, their fathers, their mates, ate their own. She tapped her own chest. Her people ended them. Every one. Burned the seed. Buried the hunger. Made law. The basin showed the aftermath. Rows of pyres, women standing grim, their faces lit by fire. Then vaults of crystal wombs, humming faintly, where embryos floated without fathers. The village reborn from glass and science. No men, Saratek said simply. Never again. And then, softer, until you. The divideth assembly split like a wound. Half cheered the law, pounding their spears into the ground. Half hissed and muttered, eyes flicking toward me with open hostility. One woman stepped forward from the hostile side. She was young, her jaw sharp, her eyes burning. She shouted words that needed no translation. Consume him. The word rippled outward. Others took it up. Consume. Consume. My stomach turned to iron. Another group countered with different cries. Prophecy. Starborn. Keeper. The plaza became a storm of argument. The high seer did not stop them. She let the sound rise and clash, like flint striking steel. Finally, she cut the air with her staff. Silence obeyed. She pointed at me, then to the sky, then to the basin. She spoke one word with terrible weight. Trial. Saratek's hand closed on my arm, steadying. They cannot agree, so you must prove. Not by words, by survival. Again, I whispered, half to myself, survive or be supper. Her mouth twitched something between pity and grim amusement. Yes, the law of absence demands. Nightfall in the cage. The returned me to the bone lattice as the sun bled violet through the canopy. The village quieted, but not completely. I heard low arguments, chants, whispers, laughter that was too sharp to be safe. Children peeked at me from behind their guardians' skirts, whispering Zal like it was a story come to life. One brave girl, the Skarstar child, slipped close enough to poke the cage and giggle before she was yanked away. I sat with my back against the lattice, the crystal blade from the trial still hidden beneath my mat. My thoughts circled the basin's visions, men tearing their families apart, their eyes full of blood and hunger. If that was their history, what did they see when they looked at me? A savior, a meal, a relapse? The law of absence was simple. No men, no hunger, no chaos. But I was here, a contradiction wrapped in flesh, and contradictions never last long in societies built on absolutes. As sleep dragged me down, I understood one thing with painful clarity. The trial ahead would not just measure my strength. They came for me at dawn, not with chains but with ritual. Sira of the Third Harvest and 2 others painted my arms with lines of black resin, sharp as calligraphy. The strokes ran from shoulder to wrist, parallel, never crossing. I asked what they meant. Saratek, who lingered like a shadow with her crystal tablets, answered, "Lines for balance, lines for prey, lines for prey that may become predator. Comforting." I muttered. The village gathered in the plaza, the basin glowing brighter than I had ever seen. The high seer raised her staff. A hush fell like gravity. This time, they did not give me a choice. The cage opened, and the circle widened. The ground had been scraped clean again. The air reeked of anticipation, metallic and sweet, like blood waiting to happen. Sira pressed the blade into my hand, the same split leaf I'd used before. The edges thrummed as if eager for memory. "Trial of hunger," Saratek whispered. "If you fall, they devour. If you stand, they must name you." I swallowed. "Name me what?" She didn't answer. The beast gate opened. From the dark belly of the village emerged a creature that seemed bred for theater, as much as for killing. 6 limbs, yes, but thicker than the first one I'd fought. Its shoulders carried horn-like protrusions that bled faint light. Its skin shimmered like hot glass, transparent in places to reveal organs pulsing with alien rhythm. Its mouth unfolded in tears, a flower blooming knives. The crowd gasped not in fear, but in hunger. The beast lowered itself, tasting the ground with its clawed hands. Then it looked at me, and I understood. This was not wild. This was trained. The fight began, the dance of death. It lunged with shocking speed, faster than its size allowed. I threw myself sideways, rolled, came up with blade ready. It snapped the air where my head had been, the rotating plates in its hands whining like bone saws. The crowd roared. Some shouted encouragement, others names I couldn't translate. The beast circled. I circled back. We measured each other. My heart banged against the cage of my ribs. It feinted left, struck right. I caught the blow on the blade, sparks of light spraying as if the weapon itself were angry. The force knocked me back to steps. My arms rang with shock. Then instinct took over, the old training, the muscle memory honed in simulations and skirmishes. I moved low, slashing at its knee joint. The blade slid between plates of glassy skin. Green ichor hissed into the dirt. The beast screamed a terrible note that vibrated in my bones. The tribe screamed with it, half delight, half fury. Temptation. It came at me in a frenzy now, slashing, biting, clawing. I dodged, stumbled, cut again. My arm ached, lungs burned, but I was still alive. And then something strange. As its blood spattered me, warm and luminous, I felt a surge of heat in my body. Not adrenaline, not fear. Something deeper, older. My vision sharpened. The tribe's voices became deliciously clear. My mouth filled with saliva. I wanted to bite. The thought horrified me, but it also thrilled, hot as lightning. For a second, I understood their men, those broken figures in the basin's vision, mouths dripping, eyes wild. I staggered back, shaking my head. No, not me. Not now. The high seer's eyes locked with mine across the circle. She saw. The Kilth beast charged again, sensing my hesitation. It struck low. I leapt high. My body landed on its back. Before it could throw me off, I drove the blade deep into the hinge of its neck, twisting until the split edges sang. The light inside its organs sputtered. Its legs buckled. It collapsed into the dust with a shudder that cracked the ground. Silence. Then an explosion of sound, cheers, chants, cries of rage and worship all tangled together. The beast twitched once, then stilled. I climbed off, staggering, covered in ichor that glowed faintly in the shadows. The high seer raised her staff. "Zal," she cried. The word echoed, picked up by dozens of throats, shaking the air like thunder. But not all voices joined. Some whispered a different word. "Consume." The feast Debatati dragged the carcass aside. Fires lit. Women tore strips of its glowing flesh, roasting them over crystal braziers. The scent was intoxicating, sweet, savory, dangerous. I was forced to sit on a raised stone. The tribe rayed around me. The high seer spoke, arms spread, her voice rising and falling like a storm tide. Saratek translated in clip fragments. "You fought. You killed. You lived. You showed hunger." I stiffened. She saw. "Yes," Saratek said grimly. "When blood touched you," the seer continued, Now the tribe decides, eat you or crown you. The words struck like a blow. Round the fire, arguments flared. Some licked their fingers with pointed tongues, their eyes fixed on me. Others shook their heads, whispered about prophecy, about omens, about futures not yet written. Sira of the third harvest stood close, her spear lowered but ready. She was protector or executioner, depending on which way the vote turned. A woman from the hostile side, sharp-jawed, hungry-eyed, bit into a strip of beast flesh, juice running down her chin. She shouted, "Taste him." One piece would not end him. Just one piece. Laughter, ugly and eager, rippled. I clenched my fists. The blade lay at my side, still humming. If they came at me, I'd fight. But my stomach twisted with betrayal. Part of me wanted them too. Part of me still burned with that alien hunger. The seer's verdict, High Seer, silenced them with a single strike of her staff. She stepped forward, her mantle glowing faintly in the firelight. She studied me with eyes that carried not hatred but sorrow. Then she touched my cheek, claws grazing my skin without breaking it. "Perhaps," she said in halting standard, her first attempt at my tongue, "the old hunger is not your destiny." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, reverent. Others snarled in frustration. She turned to the tribe and declared in her own language, her words ringing like iron, "Not devoured. Not yet." The crowd roared, half in relief, half in rage. Night of whispers that night. They locked me back in the cage, but the air was thick with whispers. I heard factions forming, voices hissing. "Keep him. Use him. Heal the bloodline. Kill him. End the hunger before it wakes in all of us." I lay on the mat, staring at the bone lattice, the blade hidden beneath me. My veins still hummed with the beast's ichor, my mouth still watered at the memory of its blood. For the first time since crashing, I doubted myself. What if they were right? What if inside me, the hunger was waiting, patient, inevitable? And worse, what if part of me wanted it to wake? I worked by moonlight, the pale twin moons of Veronine, one veined with crimson, the other milky as bone. The village had retreated to its woven homes, though voices still echoed in the canopy, arguments, prayers, whispers with teeth. Inside my cage, hidden under the mat, lay the guts of my ship I'd managed to salvage, a cracked comms ray, a shard of power crystal, a strip of conductive vine that hummed faintly when bent. Crude pieces, but I'd been trained to build fire from stone. If I tuned the crystal just right, if I aligned the resonance with the ship's dead transponder, I could launch a pulse. Not much, just a flare screaming into the void. Someone would hear, eventually. But if the tribe saw, the High Seer would call it betrayal. Sira would cut me down without hesitation. I worked anyway. My hands were steady, though my mouth still watered from the trial's blood-slick memory. The blade lay beside me, its seam ticking faintly in rhythm with my heart. When the device sparked and flared, a brief spear of light shot skyward, piercing the canopy, punching into the stars. My chest tightened. Relief or regret? The beacon was lit. Now the question was, what would come first, rescue or judgment? The gathering at dawn, they brought me not to the cage but to the plaza. The entire tribe was there, hundreds of women perched on balconies, crouched on branches, standing in the dust. The basin glowed brighter than ever, its water alive with shifting light. The High Seer stood at its edge, mantle heavy with gems that throbbed faintly, as if alive. Her staff crackled with restrained power. Beside her, Saratek clutched her tablets, eyes sharp and sorrowful. Sira of the third harvest led me forward. This time her spear wasn't lowered. It was ready. Protector or executioner, it no longer mattered which. The seer lifted her staff. "Zal," she called, her voice resonant. "Man of stars, hunger walker, survivor." The crowd murmured, the word rolling like a storm. "Zal, Zal, Zal," she continued, switching between her tongue and shards of mine. "Law is clear. 105 years, no men, no hunger, no chaos." She gestured at me, her eyes burning. "But prophecy speaks. Star-born man, to end us or to lead us." The tribe erupted. Some shouted for my blood, others for my seed. Some clapped their hands like worshippers, others licked their lips like predators. I stood at the center of the storm, mute, waiting for the blow to fall. The choice presenteth. Seer struck her staff against the basin. The water rose into a column, swirling with visions, the tribe's past, their pyres, their vaults, their long survival. Then new images, wild and shifting, me, standing beside the tribe, leading them into strange cities under alien suns. Me, devoured on an altar, my bones feeding the soil. Me, fathering children with eyes too bright, teeth too sharp. Me, alone, walking into the jungle until the roots swallowed me whole. The column collapsed back into the basin, leaving silence so thick it pressed into my ears. The seer turned to me. Choice, she spread her hands. Stay and risk hunger. Leave and risk extinction. My breath hitched. Extinction? Saratek translated, her voice breaking. Without you, without men, our wombs fail. Slowly, vaults thin. Children fewer, one day. None, I reeled. Their law of absence had saved them from chaos, but it was killing them by degrees. My presence was not just prophecy. It was necessity. The faction's plaza split visibly, to my left. The faction of blood, those who lit their lips, who muttered consume. They wanted me ended. My flesh proof their law still stood. To my right, the faction of future, those who whispered keep him, heal us, make us whole again. Their eyes glittered with awe, need, and something more dangerous, expectation. Both sides terrified me. The High Seer raised her staff for silence. Zal decides. The words struck me harder than any spear. They had thrown the burden onto me. The rescue with it was when the sky answered. A streak of fire cut through the clouds, in natural, sharp, human. A rescue ship, homing on my beacon. Its engines roared like judgment. The tribe gasped, some falling to their knees, others shouting, pointing, scattering. The seer's eyes widened, then narrowed. Your people come. Seer of the third harvest spun her spear, fury rippling in her shoulders. You called them, she hissed. You betrayed trial. You betray us. No, I said quickly, though my voice cracked. I couldn't just vanish here. Cowards answer, she spat. The rescue ship descended lower, engines rattling the canopy. The ramp began to drop, light spilling into the plaza. The final choice of Seer stepped forward, mantle whipping in the hot wind. She spoke over the roar, her voice like thunder. Choose, Zal. Go, and we close the law forever. Stay, and you break it. No middle path. The tribe screamed around us, divided, desperate. Some clawed at me to keep me. Others raised weapons to strike me down before the ship could take me. I stood frozen, the blade in my hand, the anchor still singing in my blood. My heart split between two futures. To leave was safety. I would be a man again among my kind, but I would condemn the Zairi to slow extinction. To stay was peril. I might become savior or relapse into the very hunger they feared. Perhaps both. The rescue ship hovered above, waiting. The tribe closed in, waiting. The seer's staff burned with light, waiting. And me, Lianvei, commander, survivor. Crash-landed, man trembled with the realization that either way, I had already been devoured. Not in flesh, in destiny.